The woman standing at the edge of Provo, Utah, in the summer heat of 1876, looked like she could shoot a man as easily as she could ignore him. And Franklin Zimmerman had seen plenty of both kinds of women in his 32 years riding the frontier. She was leaning against the wooden post outside the general store, her dusty split riding skirt and worn leather vest telling him she had been traveling hard. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe braid, and even from across the street, Franklin could see the firm set of her jaw, the kind that said she was done with the world and everyone in it. He had been loading supplies onto his wagon when he noticed her, and something about the way she stood, so alone yet so defiant, made him pause. Franklin adjusted his hat and crossed the dirt street, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. The town was busy this afternoon, with wagons rolling through and people going about their business. Provo was growing, becoming more civilized than the wild frontier towns he had known in his younger days, but it still had that edge to it, that feeling that anything could happen if you were not careful. "Afternoon, miss," Franklin said as he approached, keeping a respectful distance. "You look like you could use some water. It's a hot day." The woman turned her gaze on him, and he was struck by the paleness of her green eyes, like winter ice in a face tanned by sun and wind. She looked to be in her mid-20s, and there was something hardened about her, something that spoke of loss and determination in equal measure. "I am fine," she said, her voice clipped and cool. "I do not need anything from anyone." Franklin nodded slowly, recognizing the walls she had built around herself. He had seen it before in people who had been hurt, who had decided that relying on others was a luxury they could not afford. "Fair enough," he said. "But if you change your mind, the well is just around the corner. Free for anyone who needs it." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Why do you care? Just being neighborly," Franklin replied with a slight smile. "Not much more to it than that." "Well, you can save your neighborly intentions for someone who wants them," she said, turning away from him. "I said I am fine." Franklin should have walked away then. He had supplies to deliver to his ranch, work that needed doing before sunset, and a stubborn woman who clearly wanted nothing to do with him was not his concern. But something made him stay, made him lean against the post next to her, though still maintaining a respectful distance. "You know," he said conversationally, looking out at the street rather than at her, "I used to think the same way, that I did not need anybody, that I was better off alone. Spent years building my ranch by myself, not asking for help, not letting anyone get close." She did not respond, but he sensed she was listening. "Then one winter, about 5 years back, I got thrown from my horse. Broke my leg bad, way out on the range with a storm coming in. I was sure I was going to die out there, and part of me thought, well, this is what you get for being so damned independent. But my neighbor, old man named Henry, he came looking for me. Saved my life that day." Franklin paused, remembering the pain and the fear, and the overwhelming relief when he had heard Henry's voice calling through the snow. "Taught me something important. It is not about needing people. It is about deserving to have someone who cares, even when you think you are doing just fine on your own." The woman turned to look at him again, and this time there was something different in her eyes, a flicker of something that might have been curiosity or might have been pain. "That is a nice story," she said quietly, "but some of us do not have the luxury of letting people care." "Why not?" Franklin asked, his voice gentle. She looked away, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. "Because everyone I have ever let care ended up leaving one way or another. So I learned to stop needing them before they could go." There it was, the truth beneath the hard exterior. Franklin felt a pang of sympathy for this woman, this stranger who carried her hurt like armor. "I am sorry for whatever happened to make you feel that way," he said. "But shutting everyone out is not the same as being strong. Sometimes it is just another kind of lonely." "I never said I was lonely," she replied, but her voice had lost some of its edge. "No, you did not," Franklin agreed, "but I recognize it anyway because I was there once too." They stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the town continuing around them. A wagon rattled past, and somewhere down the street, someone was hammering at the blacksmith's forge. Franklin could smell the scent of fresh bread from the bakery and the earthier smell of horses and dust. "My name is Franklin Zimmerman," he said finally. "I have a cattle ranch about 10 miles north of here. I come into town every week for supplies." The woman hesitated, and for a moment he thought she would not respond. Then she said, "Penelope Lawson. I just rode in from Colorado." "Long ride," Franklin observed. "You planning to stay in Provo or just passing through?" "I do not know yet," Penelope said, and there was an uncertainty in her voice that had not been there before. "I came here looking for work, maybe a fresh start. But I am beginning to think there is no such thing." Franklin considered this. "There is always work for someone willing to do it. What kind of skills do you have?" Penelope looked at him with a mixture of defensiveness and resignation. "I can ride, rope, shoot, and work cattle as well as any man. I grew up on a ranch in Texas until my father died and the bank took everything. After that, I have been working where I could find it, moving from place to place." "How long ago did your father die?" Franklin asked. 4 years, Penelope said, and her voice was flat, emotionless. "I was 22. My mother had died when I was young, so it was just him and me. When he was gone, I had nobody. No other family, none that wanted anything to do with a woman trying to run a ranch by herself," Penelope said bitterly. "My uncle made it clear he thought I should sell out and get married, find a man to take care of me. When I refused, he refused to help." Franklin felt a surge of anger at the injustice of it, at the way the world could be so hard on a woman trying to make her own way. He knew plenty of women who worked as hard as men, who deserved the same respect and opportunities, but society had other ideas about what a woman should and should not do. "That must have been hard," he said simply. Penelope shrugged, but he could see the pain beneath the gesture. "It was what it was. I survived. I always survive." "Surviving is not the same as living," Franklin said, echoing his earlier thought. She looked at him sharply. "You do not even know me. Why do you care what kind of life I have?" Franklin met her gaze steadily. "Maybe because I see someone who has been fighting alone for too long, and I know what that does to a person. Maybe because I think you deserve better than just surviving." Penelope's expression softened slightly, and for a moment he saw past the walls to the woman beneath, the one who was tired and hurt and trying so hard not to show it. "You talk like you think you can fix things," she said. "Like you can just decide someone deserves better and make it happen." "I am not trying to fix anything," Franklin replied. "I am just saying that if you are looking for work, I could use help at my ranch. It is coming up on time to move the cattle to higher pastures, and my regular hands are busy with other work. I pay fair wages, provide meals, and there is a bunkhouse where you can stay if you need a place." Penelope stared at him, suspicion creeping back into her eyes. "Why would you offer that to a stranger?" "Because you need work, and I need help. That is how things work out here," Franklin said. "And because you said you can rope and work cattle, and I believe you. Not many women would claim that if it was not true." "You would trust me just like that?" Penelope asked. Franklin smiled slightly. "I am a pretty good judge of character. And if I am wrong, well, I will deal with that when it happens. But I do not think I am wrong about you." Penelope was silent for a long time, and Franklin could see the struggle on her face, the war between her instinct to refuse and her practical need for work and a place to stay. Finally, she said, "I do not take charity." "Good, because I am not offering any," Franklin said. "This is work, plain and simple. You will earn every dollar I pay you." She nodded slowly. "All right then. When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning," Franklin said. "I am heading back to the ranch now if you want to come with me, or you can come out in the morning. It is about 2 hours' ride north on the main road. Then you will see a sign for the Zimmerman Ranch. You cannot miss it." Penelope looked around the town, and he could see her weighing her options. "I will come now," she said finally. "I do not have much, just my horse and saddlebags, and I would rather not spend money on a hotel if I do not have to." "That is settled then," Franklin said. "Give me a few minutes to finish loading my wagon and we will head out." As he walked back across the street to his wagon, Franklin wondered if he was making a mistake. He did not know this woman, did not know if she was telling the truth about her skills or her past. But something in his gut told him she was genuine, that beneath all that prickly defensiveness was someone worth knowing. Penelope followed him a few minutes later, leading a sturdy bay mare that looked as trail-worn as she did. She had a bedroll and saddlebags tied behind her saddle and a rifle in a scabbard. Everything she owned in the world, Franklin guessed, and it fit on one horse. "That is a good-looking mare," Franklin said as she approached. "Her name is Sage," Penelope said, running a hand along the horse's neck with a gentleness that contrasted with her hard exterior. "She has carried me through a lot." Franklin nodded, understanding. A good horse could be a person's most loyal companion, especially out here where distances were vast and dangers real. "She can follow behind the wagon if you want, or you can ride alongside. Either way is fine." "I will ride," Penelope said. "I have been on enough wagons for a lifetime." They left Provo as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western mountains. The road north was well-traveled but not crowded, winding through valleys and past scattered homesteads. The landscape was beautiful in its harsh way, with sage and scrub brush covering the rolling hills, and the mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. They rode in silence for a while, and Franklin did not push for conversation. He sensed that Penelope needed time to adjust to this new situation, to decide if she had made the right choice. He kept the horses at a steady pace, not too fast but not dawdling either. Finally, as they passed a small creek where cottonwood trees provided some shade, Franklin spoke. "I should tell you about the ranch, so you know what you are getting into." Penelope glanced at him, and he continued. "I have about 500 head of cattle, mostly longhorns with some crossbreeds I have been experimenting with. The ranch itself is about 800 acres with good grazing and water. I have 2 regular hands, brothers named Tom and William Pierce. They are good men, hard workers, and they will not give you trouble for being a woman." "And if they do?" Penelope asked, her tone challenging. "Then they will answer to me," Franklin said firmly. "I do not tolerate that kind of nonsense on my property. Everyone who works for me gets treated with respect, regardless of who they are." Penelope seemed to consider this. "How long have you had the ranch?" 10 years, Franklin said. "I saved up for years working on other people's spreads, learning the business, and when I had enough, I bought this land and started building. It has been hard work, but it is mine and I am proud of it." "No wife?" Penelope asked, then seemed to regret the question. "Sorry, that is none of my business." "It is all right," Franklin said. "No, no wife. I was engaged once back when I was younger, but she decided she wanted a different kind of life, one with more comfort and less uncertainty. Cannot say I blame her. This life is not for everyone." "Do you regret it?" Penelope asked. Franklin thought about that. "I regret how it happened, but not the outcome. We would not have been happy together in the long run. She wanted me to be someone I was not, and I wanted the same from her. Better to find that out before the wedding than after. They continued riding, and gradually the silence between them became more comfortable. Franklin pointed out landmarks along the way, telling stories about the area and its history. Penelope listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just nodding. As they crested a rise, Franklin pulled the wagon to a stop. "There it is," he said, pointing down into the valley below. "The Zimmerman Ranch." Penelope reined in sage and looked where he was pointing. The ranch spread out below them, a collection of buildings nestled in a green valley with a stream running through it. The main house was a solid log structure with a wide porch, smoke rising from its chimney. Near it were a barn, a bunkhouse, corrals, and various outbuildings. In the distance, cattle grazed on the hillsides, small dark shapes against the golden grass. "It is beautiful," Penelope said, and Franklin heard something in her voice that might have been longing or might have been sadness. "It looks like a real home." "It is," Franklin said simply. "Come on, let us get you settled." As they descended into the valley, two men emerged from the barn, clearly having heard the wagon approaching. Franklin raised a hand in greeting and the men waved back. "That is Tom and William," Franklin said. "Tom is the older one with the beard." As they pulled into the yard, the two brothers approached. Tom was indeed older, probably in his 40s, with a full dark beard going gray at the edges. William was younger, maybe 30, clean-shaven with a friendly face. "Boss," Tom said, nodding to Franklin. Then his eyes went to Penelope, and Franklin saw the flash of surprise. "Tom, William, this is Penelope Lawson," Franklin said, climbing down from the wagon. "She is going to be helping out with the cattle drive to the high pastures. Penelope, these are the Pierce brothers." Penelope dismounted and nodded to the men. "Pleased to meet you." "Madam," Tom said, touching his hat. William did the same, though he looked uncertain. Franklin could see the questions in their eyes, but was grateful they did not voice them immediately. "Penelope, why do not you take Sage to the barn and get her settled? William can show you where the tack room is. Then come up to the house, and we will get you situated in the bunkhouse." "I can find it myself," Penelope said, but her tone was not as sharp as before. "I am sure you can," Franklin said, "but William knows where everything is and it will be faster." Penelope hesitated, then nodded. "All right." As she and William headed toward the barn, Tom turned to Franklin with raised eyebrows. "A woman." "A woman who knows how to work cattle," Franklin said firmly. "And who needs a job. You got a problem with that?" Tom held up his hands. "No problem, boss, just surprised is all. But if you vouch for her, that is good enough for me." "I do," Franklin said. "And I expect you and William to treat her just like any other hand. No special treatment, but no disrespect either." "You got it," Tom said. "She looks like she can handle herself anyway." Franklin nodded, hoping he was right. He began unloading the supplies from the wagon, and Tom helped him carry them into the house. It was a comfortable home, built with his own hands over the years, with a large main room that served as kitchen and living area, 2 bedrooms, and a loft for storage. By the time they had finished unloading, Penelope had returned from the barn. She stood on the porch, looking around with an expression that was hard to read. "Come on in," Franklin said, opening the door. "I will show you where you will be staying." Penelope followed him across the yard to the bunkhouse. It was a simple structure with 6 bunks, a potbelly stove, and a table with chairs. Currently, only 2 of the bunks showed signs of use, belonging to Tom and William. "You can take any of the empty bunks," Franklin said. "There is a washroom out back with a pump for water. Meals are at the main house, breakfast at sunrise, dinner at midday, and supper at sunset. You are welcome to join us, or you can take your meals here if you prefer." I will eat with everyone else, Penelope said. No point in making extra work. All right then, Franklin said. Get yourself settled and come up to the house when you are ready. I will have supper on the table in about an hour. Penelope nodded, and Franklin left her to it. As he walked back to the house, he wondered again if he had made the right decision. Hiring a woman he did not know was a risk, but something told him Penelope needed this chance, and he was willing to give it to her. Inside the house, Franklin started preparing supper. He was a decent cook, having lived alone for so long, and tonight he made a simple meal of beans, cornbread, and bacon. As he worked, Tom and William came in from finishing their evening chores. She seems all right, William said, washing his hands at the basin. A bit prickly maybe, but she knows her way around a horse. She has had a hard time, Franklin said. Lost her father and her ranch, been on her own for a few years. Tom nodded thoughtfully. That will toughen anyone up. We will do right by her, boss. Do not worry about that. When supper was ready, Franklin stepped out onto the porch and rang the bell he used to call everyone to meals. Penelope emerged from the bunkhouse a moment later, her face washed and her hair freshly braided. She had changed into a clean shirt, and Franklin noticed she moved with a confidence that suggested she was indeed comfortable with ranch life. They gathered around the large table in the main room, and Franklin said a brief grace before they began eating. The meal was quiet at first, everyone focused on their food, but gradually conversation started. So, Miss Lawson, Tom said, Franklin says you grew up on a ranch in Texas. What part? Near Fort Worth, Penelope replied. My father raised cattle and horses. It was not a big operation, but it was a good life. Must have been hard to lose it, Tom said sympathetically. It was, Penelope said, her expression guarded, but that is in the past now. Franklin steered the conversation to safer topics, discussing the work that needed to be done in the coming days. They would need to move the cattle up to the higher pastures within the week, before the lower valleys got too hot and dry. It would take several days of hard riding, and they would need to camp out on the range. Have you done trail work before? Franklin asked Penelope. Many times, she said. I know how to manage cattle on the move, how to watch for strays, and how to handle problems when they come up. Good, Franklin said. We will start the day after tomorrow. That gives us tomorrow to get everything ready, check the gear, and make sure we have enough supplies. After supper, Penelope helped clear the table despite Franklin's protests that she did not need to. I do not mind, she said. I was taught not to sit idle when there is work to be done. As they washed dishes together, Franklin found himself studying her profile, noticing the determined set of her jaw and the way her hands moved efficiently through the work. She was beautiful in an unconventional way, all sharp edges and hidden depths, and he realized he was curious to know more about her. Thank you for this, Penelope said quietly, for giving me a chance. Everyone deserves a chance, Franklin replied. Besides, I meant what I said. I need the help, and I think you will be good at the work. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for a moment the walls came down and he saw the vulnerability beneath. I will not let you down, she said. I do not think you will, Franklin said. That night, lying in his bed and listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling around him, Franklin thought about Penelope and her story. He knew what it was like to lose everything, to have to start over from nothing. He had been lucky, having the health and opportunity to build something new, but he knew not everyone got that chance. He thought about her words earlier, about not needing anybody. He understood that feeling, that desire to be self-sufficient and independent. But he had learned over the years that true strength was not in refusing help, but in accepting it when it was offered, in building connections with others rather than shutting them out. Maybe, he thought as sleep began to claim him, he could help Penelope learn that too. Not by pushing or forcing, but simply by showing her that not everyone would leave, that some people could be counted on. The next day dawned clear and warm, with the promise of a hot afternoon ahead. Franklin was up before sunrise, as was his habit, and he found Penelope already in the barn checking over tack and gear. "You are up early," he said. "Old habits," Penelope replied. "On a ranch there is always work to be done at first light." They worked together through the morning, checking saddles and bridles, counting out supplies, and making sure everything was in good repair. Franklin was impressed by Penelope's thoroughness and her knowledge. She knew exactly what to look for in a saddle that might give trouble on the trail, which ropes were strongest, and what supplies they would need for several days out on the range. Tom and William joined them mid-morning, and the four of them worked as a team, falling into an easy rhythm. Franklin noticed that Penelope held her own with the men, neither asking for special consideration nor shrinking from the heavier work. She was, he realized, exactly what she had claimed to be, a competent ranch hand who happened to be a woman. At midday, they broke for dinner, and Franklin made a simple meal of sandwiches and cold water. They ate in the shade of the barn, grateful for the respite from the growing heat. "Weather looks good for the drive," Tom observed, squinting at the sky. "Should be clear for the next few days at least." "Let us hope it stays that way," Franklin said. "I do not fancy moving cattle in a thunderstorm." "How far are the high pastures?" Penelope asked. "About 30 miles northwest," Franklin replied. "There is good grass up there and a couple of natural springs. The cattle do well there through the summer months, and it keeps the lower pastures from being overgrazed." "Makes sense," Penelope said. "My father used to do something similar. He called it rotation grazing." "That is exactly what it is," Franklin said, pleased that she understood. Good land management is the key to a successful ranch. That afternoon, they finished their preparations and took care of other chores around the ranch. Franklin found himself watching Penelope work, noticing the way she moved with confidence and purpose. She was not afraid to get dirty or to do the hard physical labor that ranching required. By the end of the day, she was dusty and sweating, but there was a light in her eyes that had not been there when he first met her in Provo. At supper that evening, the conversation flowed more easily. Tom told stories about his years working on various ranches, and William shared news about the town and the people there. Penelope listened more than she talked, but Franklin noticed she was beginning to relax, to let her guard down just a little. After the meal, as the sun set behind the mountains and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Franklin stepped out onto the porch. Penelope joined him a moment later, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. "Thought you might want this," she said, handing him one. "Thank you," Franklin said, surprised by the gesture. They stood in silence for a while, sipping their coffee and watching the day fade into night. "It is peaceful here," Penelope said finally. "I had forgotten what that felt like." "It is one of the things I love most about this place," Franklin said. "The quiet, the space to think. Out here you can breathe." "Do you ever get lonely?" Penelope asked, then seemed to catch herself. "Sorry, I should not have asked that. It is all right," Franklin said. "And yes, sometimes I do. But there is a difference between being alone and being lonely. I have learned to be comfortable with my own company, but I also value the people I let into my life." "How do you know which people to let in?" Penelope asked. "How do you know they will not leave or disappoint you?" Franklin considered the question carefully. "I guess you never know for certain," he said. "But I have learned that the risk of getting hurt is worth the possibility of finding real connection. And sometimes people leave not because they want to, but because circumstances force them to. That does not mean they did not care." Penelope was quiet for a long moment. My father did not want to leave me, she said softly. He got sick, and there was nothing anyone could do. I watched him die slowly over 6 months, and I could not stop it, could not fix it, and then he was gone, and I was alone. Franklin felt a wave of compassion for her. I am sorry, he said. That must have been incredibly hard. It was, Penelope said, and her voice was thick with emotion. And then to lose the ranch on top of it, to have everyone who I thought would help turn their backs on me because I was just a woman. It made me realize that depending on people was a mistake, that I had to rely only on myself. But that is not really living, Franklin said gently. That is just surviving, like you said before. Maybe, Penelope said, but at least when you do not need anyone, you cannot be disappointed. Franklin turned to face her. Maybe not, he said, echoing his words from their first meeting. But everyone deserves someone who cares, even if they have been hurt before, especially if they have been hurt before. Penelope looked at him, and in the fading light he could see tears glistening in her eyes. I do not know if I remember how to let people care, she whispered. Then maybe it is time to learn again, Franklin said, and maybe this is a good place to start. She nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you, she said, for saying that, for understanding. They stood together in the growing darkness, and Franklin felt something shift between them, a connection forming where before there had been only wariness and distance. He realized he was starting to care about this prickly, wounded woman, and the thought both excited and frightened him. The next morning, they set out for the high pastures just as the sun was rising. Franklin led the way on his sorrel gelding, with Tom and William flanking the herd and Penelope bringing up the rear. The cattle were used to this seasonal move and went along fairly docilely, though there were always a few troublemakers who tried to break away from the group. Penelope proved her worth immediately, cutting off strays with skill and keeping the back of the herd moving steadily forward. Franklin watched her work and felt a growing respect for her abilities. She had not exaggerated her skills, and she rode with a confidence that spoke of years of experience. They made good progress that first day, stopping at midday to let the cattle rest and graze. Franklin rode back to check on Penelope, finding her sitting on a rock eating jerky and watching the herd. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Fine," she said. "This is good work. I had forgotten how much I enjoyed it." Franklin dismounted and sat down near her. "You are good at it." "Where did you learn to cut cattle like that?" "My father taught me," Penelope said, a smile touching her lips. "He said I had a natural feel for it, that I could anticipate what a steer would do before it did it. He used to say I would have made a better cowboy than most of the men he hired." "He was right," Franklin said. "You have real talent." Penelope looked pleased by the compliment. "It means a lot to hear you say that. Most people look at me and see only a woman who should be doing something else." "Their loss," Franklin said, "and my gain." They continued the drive through the afternoon, and as the sun began to lower, they found a good spot to make camp near a stream. The cattle settled in to graze, and the four of them worked together to set up their bedrolls and start a fire. Supper was beans and bacon cooked over the fire, along with biscuits Franklin had made that morning. It was simple food, but it tasted good after a long day of riding. They sat around the fire afterward, drinking coffee and talking about the day's work. "We made good time," Tom said. "If we keep this pace, we will reach the high pastures by tomorrow evening." "That is what I am hoping," Franklin said. "The sooner we get them settled up there, the sooner we can get back to other work." As the evening wore on, William and Tom retired to their bedrolls, but Franklin found himself reluctant to sleep. The night was beautiful, with stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Penelope seemed to feel the same way, because she stayed by the fire, staring into the flames. "Penny for your thoughts," Franklin said. She looked at him and smiled slightly. "That is a bargain price. My thoughts are probably not worth even that much." "I doubt that," Franklin said, "but you do not have to share if you do not want to." Penelope was quiet for a moment, then said, "I was thinking about how strange it is to feel content. I have been moving from place to place for so long, never staying anywhere long enough to feel settled. But here, doing this work, being part of something, it feels right." "Then maybe you have found where you are supposed to be," Franklin suggested. "Maybe," Penelope said, "but I am afraid to believe that. Every time I start to feel like things might be all right, something happens to prove me wrong." Franklin moved closer, sitting down beside her. "I understand that fear," he said, "but you cannot let the past dictate your future. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith and trust that things will work out." "Is that what you are doing?" Penelope asked. "Taking a leap of faith with me?" "I suppose I am," Franklin said. "But it does not feel like much of a risk. It feels like the right thing to do." Penelope looked at him, and in the firelight her eyes were soft and vulnerable. "I do not want to disappoint you," she said. "You could not," Franklin said with certainty. "You have already shown me who you are, and I like what I see." She leaned toward him slightly, as if drawn by an invisible force, and Franklin felt his heart begin to beat faster. He could smell the scent of sage and leather on her, could see the rise and fall of her breath. For a moment he thought she might kiss him, and he wanted her to with an intensity that surprised him. But then she pulled back, wrapping her arms around herself. "I am not ready," she whispered. "I am sorry." "There is nothing to be sorry for," Franklin said, though he felt a pang of disappointment. "We will take things as slowly as you need." "Thank you," Penelope said, and the gratitude in her voice was genuine. They sat together a while longer, not touching but connected nonetheless, until finally the fire burned down to embers and they both retreated to their bedrolls. Franklin lay awake for a long time, thinking about Penelope and the unexpected feelings she was stirring in him. He had not planned on this, had not expected to meet someone who would challenge him and intrigue him in equal measure. But now that he had, he could not imagine letting her go. The next day brought more of the same hard work, pushing the cattle steadily northward into higher country. The landscape changed as they climbed, becoming more rugged and beautiful. Pine trees began to appear among the scrub, and the air grew cooler and clearer. Penelope continued to impress everyone with her skill and stamina. She never complained, never asked for special treatment, and worked as hard as any of them. By midday, even Tom, who had been the most skeptical about hiring a woman, was singing her praises. "That girl can ride," he told Franklin during a brief rest. "I have seen plenty of men who could not keep up with her." "I told you she was good," Franklin said, unable to keep the pride out of his voice. "You did," Tom agreed, "and I am man enough to admit when I am wrong. She is an asset, no question about it." They reached the high pastures as the sun was setting, and Franklin felt a sense of satisfaction as he watched the cattle spread out across the lush grass. This land was some of the best on his property, and he knew the cattle would thrive here through the summer. They made camp one final night, planning to head back to the ranch in the morning. Everyone was tired but in good spirits, pleased with how smoothly the drive had gone. Over supper, William regaled them with a story about a cattle drive gone wrong, where half the herd had stampeded into a river, and they had spent 3 days fishing wet cows out of the water. Penelope laughed at the story, and Franklin found himself captivated by the sound. It was the first time he had heard her truly laugh, without reservation or guardedness, and it transformed her face. She looked younger, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. After the meal, Tom and William headed to their bedrolls early, both exhausted from the long days. Franklin and Penelope remained by the fire, as had become their habit. "This was good," Penelope said. "Thank you for letting me be part of it." "You earned your place," Franklin said. "And I hope you will stay on, not just for this drive, but for the long term. I could use a hand like you permanently." Penelope looked at him with surprise. "You want me to stay?" "I do," Franklin said. "If you want to. I know you came to Provo looking for a fresh start, and I think you could have that here. Good work, fair pay, and people who respect you for who you are." "And you?" Penelope asked softly. "What do you want from me?" Franklin met her gaze steadily. "Right now, I want you to stay and work on the ranch. Beyond that, I would like to get to know you better, to see where this connection between us might lead, but only if that is what you want too." Penelope was quiet for a long moment, and Franklin could see the internal struggle playing out on her face. Finally, she said, "I feel something when I am with you, something I have not felt in a long time. It scares me, but it also feels right." "It scares me too," Franklin admitted. "I have been alone for a long time, and opening up to someone is not easy, but I think you are worth the risk." "What if I disappoint you?" Penelope asked. "What if I am not who you think I am?" "Then we will deal with that when it happens," Franklin said, "but I do not think you will. I think you are exactly who I think you are, a strong, capable woman who has been hurt but has not let it break her." Penelope's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I want to believe that," she whispered. "I want to believe that I can have something good again, that I deserve it." "You do deserve it," Franklin said, moving closer to her. "You deserve all the good things life has to offer." This time, when she leaned toward him, she did not pull away. Their lips met in a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet, and Franklin felt something inside him settle into place, as if a piece he had not known was missing had finally been found. When they parted, Penelope was smiling, really smiling, and Franklin knew he would do everything in his power to keep that smile on her face. "I will stay," she said, "for as long as you want me." "Then you will be here a very long time," Franklin replied and kissed her again. They returned to the ranch the next day, and life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Penelope moved into her own small cabin that Franklin had originally built for storage, but quickly converted into living quarters. She worked alongside Tom and William during the days, and most evenings she would join Franklin on his porch to watch the sunset and talk about everything and nothing. As the summer progressed, their relationship deepened. Franklin found himself falling in love with Penelope's strength and vulnerability, her sharp wit and hidden tenderness. She was complex in a way that fascinated him, layers upon layers of experience and emotion that she slowly revealed as she learned to trust him. Penelope, for her part, began to let down her walls. She talked more about her father and the ranch she had lost, about the pain of being dismissed and overlooked because of her gender. Franklin listened without judgment, offering comfort and understanding, and gradually he saw her heal from those old wounds. One evening in late July, as they sat together on the porch watching the stars come out, Penelope said, "I never thought I could be this happy. After everything that happened, I convinced myself that happiness was not something I could have." "What changed?" Franklin asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "You," Penelope said simply. "You showed me that it is okay to need people, that letting someone care about you does not make you weak. You were patient with me when I was prickly and defensive, and you never tried to change who I am." "I would not want to change you," Franklin said. "I love you exactly as you are." It was the first time either of them had spoken the word love out loud, and Penelope's eyes widened. "You love me." "I do," Franklin said, his voice steady and sure. "I love you, Penelope Lawson. I love your strength and your courage, your skill with horses and cattle, the way you laugh when you think no one is listening. I love everything about you." Tears spilled down Penelope's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too," she said. "I think I started loving you that first day in Provo when you would not let me push you away. You saw past my walls to who I really was, and you cared anyway." Franklin pulled her close, kissing her with all the love and passion he felt. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless and smiling. "Marry me," Franklin said. "Be my wife, my partner in all things. Help me build this ranch into something even better than it is now." "Yes," Penelope said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married in Provo 6 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the town church. Tom and William stood as witnesses, along with a few other friends Franklin had made over the years. Penelope wore a dress she had bought in town, simple but beautiful, and Franklin had never seen anything more lovely. After the ceremony, they held a celebration at the ranch, with neighbors and friends coming from miles around to wish them well. There was music and dancing, food and drink and laughter that echoed across the valley. As Franklin danced with his new wife under the stars, he felt a contentment so deep it almost brought tears to his eyes. "Happy?" he asked Penelope. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied. "You gave me back my life, Franklin. You showed me that I could have a home and a family again." "We gave that to each other," Franklin corrected. "You taught me that opening my heart was worth the risk, that love is stronger than fear." They kissed, and their guests cheered, and Franklin knew that this was just the beginning of their story together. Life on the ranch continued, but now it was richer and fuller with Penelope as Franklin's wife. She was not content to just work the cattle and help with the daily chores. She had ideas for improving the ranch, for breeding better stock and rotating the pastures more efficiently. Franklin listened to her suggestions and implemented many of them, recognizing her knowledge and experience. Together, they made the ranch more prosperous than it had ever been. Word spread about the Zimmerman ranch and the unusual partnership between Franklin and his capable wife. Some people disapproved, thinking a woman had no place doing such work, but most respected what they had built together. A year after their marriage, Penelope discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both of them with joy and a little nervousness. They had talked about having children, but the reality of it was both exciting and daunting. "What if I am not a good mother?" Penelope asked one night as they lay in bed, her hand on her still flat stomach. "You will be wonderful," Franklin assured her. "You are strong and loving and capable of anything you set your mind to. Our child will be lucky to have you." "I never had a mother growing up," Penelope said. "I do not have anyone to show me how to do this." "We will figure it out together," Franklin said, "just like we figure out everything else." Their son was born in early spring, a healthy baby boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. They named him Samuel, after Franklin's grandfather, and from the moment Franklin held his son in his arms, he knew his life was complete. Penelope took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. She was tender and fierce in equal measure, protecting her son while also allowing him the freedom to explore and grow. Franklin watched her with awe, seeing new depths to the woman he loved. Tom and William were delighted with the new addition to the ranch family. They became honorary uncles, teaching Samuel to ride almost as soon as he could walk and filling his head with stories of the open range and the wild frontier. The ranch became a place of laughter and life, no longer just a business but a true home. As Samuel grew, Franklin and Penelope expanded the ranch further. They bought additional land and increased their herd, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. But they never forgot what was important: family, integrity, and treating everyone with respect regardless of who they were. Penelope became known throughout the region not just as Franklin's wife, but as a rancher in her own right. Other women began seeking her out, asking for advice or looking for work. She hired several over the years, giving them the same chance Franklin had once given her, and watching them flourish just as she had. 3 years after Samuel was born, Penelope gave birth to twin daughters, Grace and Rose. The ranch house rang with children's laughter, and Franklin could hardly remember what life had been like before his family filled it with noise and joy. One evening, when the children were in bed and the house was finally quiet, Franklin and Penelope sat together on their porch, as they had done countless times over the years. It was their place to talk and dream, to share their thoughts and feelings about the life they were building together. "Do you remember when I told you I did not need anyone?" Penelope asked, her hand clasped in Franklin's. "I remember," Franklin said. "You were very convincing." Penelope laughed softly. "I was so wrong. I needed someone very much. I just did not know it yet. I needed you." "And I needed you," Franklin said. "You made me see that my life was incomplete, that all the success and property in the world meant nothing without someone to share it with." "We have built something good here," Penelope said, looking out at the ranch that had become their shared dream. "A place where people can come and feel safe, where they can work hard and be respected for it, where children can grow up strong and free." "We have," Franklin agreed. "And it all started because I could not walk past a stubborn woman who insisted she did not need help." Penelope turned to him with a smile. "And I am grateful every day that you did not listen to me. You saw past my walls and my fear, and you refused to let me push you away." "That is because I saw who you really were," Franklin said. "A woman who had been hurt but not broken, who needed someone to remind her that she deserved love and happiness." "You gave me more than that," Penelope said. "You gave me a home, a family, and a life I never dreamed I could have. You showed me that needing people does not make you weak, and that letting someone care about you is one of the bravest things you can do." Franklin pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "You did the same for me. Before you, I was just going through the motions, building something but not really living. You taught me what it means to truly share your life with someone, to be vulnerable and open." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the night and the gentle breathing of their children inside the house. The ranch spread out around them, peaceful and prosperous, a testament to everything they had built together. As the years passed, the Zimmerman ranch continued to thrive. Samuel grew into a fine young man who shared his parents' love of the land and their commitment to treating everyone fairly. The twins were spirited and clever, inheriting their mother's determination and their father's steady nature. Franklin and Penelope aged together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced challenges, as all couples do, weathering droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns, and the changing times that were slowly transforming the West. But they faced them together, drawing strength from each other and the family they had built. Other children came over the years, 2 more sons and another daughter, until the ranch house was bursting with life and love. Penelope proved to be not just a capable rancher, but a devoted mother, raising her children to be strong and independent, teaching her daughters that they could do anything their brothers could do, and her sons that respecting women was not optional but essential. Tom and William remained with the ranch all their lives, becoming part of the extended family. When Tom's health began to fail in his later years, Franklin and Penelope cared for him as they would their own father, ensuring he lived out his days in comfort and dignity. William eventually married a widow from town and brought her to the ranch, where she fit in seamlessly with the life they had all built together. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Franklin surprised Penelope with a brand for the ranch that incorporated both their initials, officially making her an equal partner in everything they had built. She cried when she saw it, not from sadness but from the overwhelming joy of being so completely seen and valued. "You have always been my equal partner," Franklin said as he held her, "but I wanted everyone else to know it too." "I love you," Penelope said, "more than I can ever put into words. You changed my life in every way that matters." "We changed each other's lives," Franklin said. "That is what love does. It transforms us into better versions of ourselves." As they grew older, they began to step back from the day-to-day running of the ranch, allowing Samuel and eventually his siblings to take on more responsibility. But they never stopped being involved, never stopped caring about the land and the people who worked it. Franklin and Penelope spent more time together, taking long rides across the property they loved, talking about their memories and the life they had shared. They visited the high pastures where they had first kissed and the spot in Provo where they had met, marveling at how far they had come from that first prickly encounter. "You have any regrets?" Franklin asked one day as they sat on a hilltop overlooking the ranch. Penelope thought about it seriously before answering. "I regret the years I spent closed off from people, convinced I had to be alone, but I do not regret anything that happened after I met you. Every moment, good and difficult, has been worth it because we faced it together." "I feel the same way," Franklin said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Penelope, you and the family we created together." "You told me once that everyone deserves someone who cares," Penelope said. "You were right, and I am so grateful that I found that someone in you." They continued to watch the ranch below, where their children and grandchildren were going about their work, carrying on the legacy Franklin and Penelope had built together. It was a good legacy, one built on love and respect, hard work and integrity. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Franklin took Penelope's hand. "Ready to head back?" he asked. "In a moment," Penelope said. "I just want to sit here with you a little longer, appreciating everything we have." So they sat together, hands clasped, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was cooling, carrying the scent of sage and pine, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the lowing of cattle and the laughter of their grandchildren. This, Franklin thought, was what it was all about. Not just the land or the success, but these quiet moments with the person you loved, appreciating the life you had built together brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. When they finally rode back to the ranch house, the lights were on and smoke was rising from the chimney. Their eldest granddaughter, Sarah, was cooking supper, and the house was filled with the sounds of family. Franklin helped Penelope down from her horse, and they stood for a moment, just looking at the home they had created. "We did good," Penelope said softly. "We did better than good," Franklin replied. "We built something that will last long after we are gone." They walked into the house together, hand in hand, greeted by the love and warmth of the family that was their greatest achievement. And as Franklin looked around at the faces of his children and grandchildren, he knew that everything had worked out exactly as it was supposed to. Years continued to pass, and Franklin and Penelope aged with grace and dignity, surrounded by the love of their family and the respect of their community. They never stopped being partners, never stopped caring for each other with the same tenderness they had shown from the beginning. When Franklin's health began to fail in his 78th year, Penelope was by his side constantly, just as he had always been by hers. She held his hand through the difficult nights, told him stories about their life together, and assured him that she would be all right, even though they both knew her heart was breaking. "I do not want to leave you," Franklin said one evening, his voice weak but his eyes still full of love. "I know," Penelope said, tears streaming down her face, "but you have given me more than a lifetime of happiness. You taught me how to love and be loved, how to trust and be vulnerable. Whatever time we have left, I will treasure it." "I love you," Franklin said. "I have loved you from that first day in Provo when you told me you did not need anyone. I knew even then that you were special, that you were someone I wanted in my life." "I love you too," Penelope said. "You are my heart, Franklin Zimmerman. You have been from the moment you refused to let me push you away." Franklin lived for another 3 months, long enough to see the ranch through another successful season, long enough to say goodbye to each of his children and grandchildren, long enough to tell Penelope one final time how much he loved her. When he passed peacefully in his sleep one autumn night, Penelope grieved deeply but not desperately. She had loved him completely and been loved in return, and that was more than many people ever got. She knew Franklin would not want her to give up on life, would want her to continue living fully and loving fiercely. So she did. Penelope lived for another 15 years, watching her children and grandchildren continue to build on the foundation she and Franklin had laid. She remained active in the ranch until the very end, still riding and giving advice, still treating everyone with the respect and dignity Franklin had taught her was so important. She told stories about Franklin to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive and ensuring that future generations knew about the man who had seen past her walls to the person she really was, who had insisted that everyone deserved someone who cares, even when they insisted they did not. When Penelope finally passed in her sleep at the age of 91, surrounded by family and at peace, she was buried next to Franklin on the hilltop, where they had spent so many evenings watching the sun set over their ranch. Their children commissioned a stone marker that read, "Franklin and Penelope Zimmerman." They built a life on love, respect, and the belief that everyone deserves someone who cares. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren, each one carrying forward the values Franklin and Penelope had instilled. The story of how they met, of the stubborn woman who insisted she needed nobody and the patient cowboy who showed her that everyone deserves someone who cares, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And in that way, their love lived on, not just in the land they had tended and the buildings they had built, but in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched. They had created something lasting, something beautiful, something that proved that even the most wounded heart could heal when it found the right person to care for it. Their story was a testament to the power of patience and understanding, of seeing past someone's defenses to the vulnerable person beneath, of believing that everyone deserves love and connection, even when they have convinced themselves otherwise. It was a love story that began with resistance and bloomed into something extraordinary, proving that sometimes the best relationships are the ones we did not know we needed until they found us. And so the ranch stood, generation after generation, a monument to Franklin and Penelope's love and the life they had built together from that first chance meeting in Provo so many years ago. The mountains watched over it, unchanging and eternal, just as Franklin and Penelope's love had been unchanging and eternal, a light that continued to shine long after they were gone, guiding their descendants and reminding them that love, real love, was worth every risk, every vulnerability, every moment of opening your heart to another person. The end.